He was the most senior Asian police officer in the UK. He won numerous awards, including the CBE for policing. Not one to shy away from controversy. Our guest today is the bold, the inspirational, and the very determined Tariq Ghafur. Welcome to our show, Tariq.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for coming on such short notice, by the way.
No
really
problem.
Appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
So, Tariq, going back to when you were young, I believe you, your family came from Uganda, and you lived your earlier years in East Africa. Why did you guys move?
Well, it's quite an interesting story because my parents and my grandparents were born in Punjab in India. And of course we had the partition. Just after the partition, the British were building railway in East Africa. So they moved over to East Africa, and then we settled in Uganda. And of course that's where my early childhood was. So up to the age of about 16, I lived and grew up in Uganda. But then there was a person, a traitor called Idi Amin, who effectively decided one day that he's going to kick everybody out of Uganda. But just prior to him kicking us out, I'd already come to UK to study, you know, as you know.
Okay, what were you studying?
Well, it was, you know, in our communities, you either had to be a teacher or a doctor
or engineer.
or engineer, exactly. So, you know, it was my kind of early aspiration to be a doctor. So I'd come here to do my A-levels in science subjects. Then my parents and my family got kicked out. So things started to change from there.
But what was it like growing up in East Africa?
Oh, fantastic. I mean, Uganda is, you know, in many ways, in terms of natural resources, in terms of weather, in terms of everything else, absolutely brilliant.
But were you like a small, tight-knit community there?
I lived in a small community called Soroti, which was in northwest Uganda. Lived amongst the Gujarati community, learned how to speak Gujarati, studied in an English school. So I think in many ways, you know, it was a good, sound upbringing, really.
When you came to England, what was your first reaction? Big change from Uganda? Well,
it was. I mean, the first reaction was I came here in February and it was damn cold. And I remember coming off, you know, the airline and at one of the airports, and I thought, good grief, what have I got into? But everything seemed so structured, so systematic here, you know, and so in many ways bright, because to a certain extent, you know, Uganda was still a developing country.
So why did you decide to become a police officer? Why policing? You were studying medicine.
I know initially it was just purely, you know, circumstances. As I said, my parents got kicked out. They came here without a penny. And I was
because your father was quite well-to-do, wasn't he?
Extremely. We had a building construction company there. Yes. He was a local politician up there.
Yeah.
And yes, we were successful, but overnight they were kicked out with not a single penny, so they became refugees.
Oh my God, so it's almost like riches to rag.
Well, exactly. And almost second time, because of course when the partition occurred, you know, you had people who moved from Punjab in both directions. So effectively they had nothing. And I was the eldest in the family. Then I had to make a choice. And, you know, the choices at 16 and 17 were somewhat limited. I was 17 years of age.
So why did you join the police force?
Well, you know, because I could have joined any of the services. I could have joined the army, the navy, fire service, etc. But my mother didn't want me to go away from home. You know, they wanted us to all live together. So I used to play a bit of sport with police, and I thought, well, I'll give it as a taster.
Yeah.
So when I came into the police, initially it was just purely as a stopgap.
Yeah.
And get some money and get the family settled down. But when I came in, I realized there's a tremendous career to be made here. And I started my long journey and ended up spending 34 years in policing.
But when you joined, you were one of the 2 ethnic police officers in a force of 6,000. You know, you must have stuck out like an odd thumb.
Well, I never realized it, you know, because I went to the local training center, spent 13, 14 weeks there. Enjoyed myself quite significantly. I was learning new things. I was learning the law. I was kind of engaging in all the activity.
So you felt comfortable in your skin?
Well,
you didn't feel like you were the odd one out?
No, because you know, when people are born here and they go through schooling systems, they go through and they grow up, they see this kind of some of the prejudice that occurs. I never did. Never, or if it was there, I didn't actually visualize it. But the interesting thing was that my very first day, there was a small police station called Salford. I came into the police station in uniform, and they wouldn't believe I was a policeman. So they wouldn't let me in. So an inspector had to vouch for me, you know. So that was my first experience. But then, you know, I was working in a place called Salford, which was a tough inner city area. There were no ethnic minorities there. I stuck out, as you said.
Yeah.
But often, you know, when people used to abuse me and they used my color of skin to abuse me, I just thought they was merely an extension. I didn't kind of internalize it. But of course, people who are born here, who go through the system, they feel they're being disadvantaged. They internalize it more than I did, actually.
But there must have been challenges of being a non-white officer in a predominantly white police force.
Initially, I didn't kind of feel that there was a challenge because I was a good operational officer. I worked in some tough areas and, you know, enjoyed myself, you know, young, vibrant kind of person. But I think as I got through the ranks, you know, I started to see really, you know, some of the difficulties some of the officers, particularly from minority communities, were facing, and some of them I had to provide support to, some of them I had to mentor and coach, and I think my awareness increased as it kind of I was going up the ranks in different areas, and I think, you know, quite clearly some of those times were difficult, you know.
Why do you feel, Tariq, that even though Asians are the largest ethnic minority in the UK, but don't you feel we are underrepresented in the police force?
Well, not only police force. I think there is a real problem in public services right across the board. I mean, if you look...
Is it a problem from our end that we don't want to participate, or is it a problem from the other side that we're not welcome?
I think both. One, in the sense that, you know, if you are under scrutiny all the time, then you have to be better. And you have also, you know, got to be able to sustain some very, very difficult times and periods. And also when you're different, you know, people, you have a great deal of focus on you. So I think in that sense, you really have got to have very good support, you've got to have good mentors, you've got to have good coaches. On the other hand, sadly, you know, I think what I found, unlike in the US or in Canada, where if you're competent, you've got skills, people might not lack the background you're from, you still will make it. Here...
But you're judged on your capabilities.
You're judged on your competence, your skills. Here, sometimes, you know, people like to surround themselves with like-minded people, so you're much more likely to be judged on your ability to fit in, really, rather than bring this kind of individuality, bring the diversity. And often, you know, in leadership terms, I used to see many leaders who used to surround themselves with like-minded people. And in effect, you know, diversity actually creates, in leadership terms, quite a great deal of difficulty, because you have to deal with people from different backgrounds, you know, different genders. Consequently, you know, they're not going to tell you exactly what you want to hear. So consequently, whilst they're very productive, they're hard to lead. So I thought there was a lot of that. And as in public sector, and this is a problem in public sector, because you can look at government, you can look at local authorities, you can look at the high echelons of the managerial sector in the health service, in education, that we don't have people at the top. And part of that is sometimes, you know, you're competing against people who know how to get through the system. And of course, you know, there is discrimination and there is prejudice.
Like there's a glass, some, you know, women feel there's a glass ceiling for them in the corporate structure when you're going higher up the ladder. And do you feel it's the same way?
Yeah, of course, until there are appreciable numbers. And one of the solutions that has been, you know, I've just come back from South Africa, you know, US I've been a lot, that people, you know, they started to initiate what is called affirmative action, positive action. And in fact, what that started to do was to put people, perhaps sometimes wrongly, into positions, but once, the critical argument I used to make for people to be represented at the top were two. One is that you have to create role models, that you've got to have people who can look up to and say, well, that person has reached that. And I thought I was quite a strong role model in that aspect.
A lot of people I've interviewed have actually said there's a big importance, and you know, they all are achievers, and they've said there's a big importance to role models and to mentors. And it can really help someone develop their personality and develop their skill set if they have one.
I entirely agree with that. You know, if you've got good mentors, you have role models in positions, then, you know, it actually, in a visible sense, you know, gives people, inspires people to actually aim for that. I think there is another very serious reason, is that if you look at our communities, they're very extremely diverse. Those communities rely on public services in various forms, including the police. Now, you know, you can't have people, you know, at the top who are not emotionally connected to those communities.
You need to be accessible to your community.
Yeah, not only accessible, you need to understand it, you need to feel it, you need to kind of understand the emotions within those communities. Once you understand the communities, you can make policies and strategies that are relevant to them, and you can measure the impact of them. And I think that is where I excelled, in the sense that, you know, not only professionally, operationally I was good. I commanded 27,000 officers in the Met during my period here. But I also, you know, met a huge amount of communities and I was just kind of counting the other day that I'd probably seen face to face in London and talked to about 2.8 million people.
Wow.
And of
so
course,
what did you most enjoy about your job as a police officer?
I mean, working with some very talented people, and secondly, you know, the feeling that I was engaging in public good, you know, in a public service, in the sense that, you know, contributing towards creating safer communities, you know, sometimes kind of, you know, picking out of those communities what I call dysfunctional role models, the criminals, and actually putting them through the criminal justice system.
But there are dangers involved to your job. Did you ever have a near-death experience?
Once or twice. I mean, you know, we were involved in some serious disorder. You know, I was a sergeant in a place called Moss Side when there were riots. During the miners' strike, we were faced with some intense disorder in a little village. You know, and
by disorder, you mean like guns?
No, well, in UK we're lucky that there are not many guns, and you don't have, you know, in instance, most of the police officers are not armed. Where people routinely.
But don't you think they should be?
No.
Really?
No, I think we have strong gun laws here. We have majority of the population don't carry guns. When the guns are used, they're used on what we call bad on bad. And police officers, you know, we're the only major city in the world where police officers don't carry guns. So
and they can still effectively police without guns.
And in many ways, you know, policing is about policing with consent and cooperation of the communities. And I think the more kind of, you know,
but how can you police a criminal with consent?
Well, the criminals will not use guns on police. It's very rare where we get instances where, you know, criminals will use guns on fellow criminals to settle scores. But
so they're conscious that way?
Well, I think logically most of the gun crime is on people who know each other rather than strangers. So we don't get drive-by shootings like, you know, is the case in the US. So I don't think there is a need. And the longer we can keep that, the better it is, because policing is being part of the community. And if you're part of the community, you get good community intelligence, which helps you to solve crime. And if you move beyond that and become an army of occupation on the public, on the communities, I think that's dangerous.
Now, you also did a master's in criminology. Did that help your career?
Well, what happened is that, you know, as I said earlier, I came in to study. And when I joined the police, I obviously missed that opportunity. So what I did was I did 10 years of part-time study. So I did my degree in public administration and politics. Then I did a master's. At that time, if I had done a PhD, a doctorate, you know, I would have been told, well, this is not an operational police officer, he's an academic. So I stopped there.
So you enjoyed studying?
Yeah, I enjoyed studying. I got a lot of value, and in fact, you know, it took me out of the bubble of just policing, meeting different people. So that helped itself.
But your career progressed quite rapidly through the ranks. Do you feel that it was because you had, you know, you made the effort to go get degrees, you went to the US, you got trained by the FBI, you went to the FBI Academy? Do you feel that all those factors?
Yeah, absolutely, because one thing was that I kept myself very focused on operational policing, even as a leader. I spent most of my career in operational policing. So I didn't drift off into some kind of, you know, headquarters jobs or whatever. So I think focus on what my core role was, you know, leading and inspiring teams. I think that helped. Secondly, yes, I had to be better. Just being rounded, you know, and accepting that you have to be better, I think that helped me. And the other thing is I didn't jump through the ranks. Every rank I got into,
one step at a time.
I got the grounding, and then I moved on to the next rank, and slowly, and I also moved around different police forces, competed against other people to get jobs. So I think all that kind of hard work, commitment, you know, belief in oneself that they can do better actually helped me.
But what was your experience like at the FBI? Is it like you see in the movies?
Well, I think, you know, there's a lot of mystique about policing, and there's a lot of kind of, you know, notions about policing put up by the media, and the public are fascinated by it.
Yes, they totally are.
But when you take, you know, real policing, you know, you see the worst and the best in communities, you know, and sometimes, you know, there are very sad experiences when you come across, you know, instances where people have been killed or maimed. On the other hand, you know, some of the heroic acts which members of the public undertake. So you see both. So my experience really was about the reality and complex nature of policing, rather than in a half-hour television program. You know, you can arrest,
CSI.
you can arrest, you can convict, you can.
Is there any truth, by the way? I have to ask you, to these very popular programs like Crime Scene Investigation and so on and so forth. Do you see them? Do you watch them?
Well, I don't watch police programs.
Really?
You know, I don't particularly, you know.
Are you a Desperate Housewives fan?
No, I'm not actually. I'm a sports fan. I'm afraid I watch sport. But having said that, I think those programs, of course, the advisors behind those programs are police.
Yes.
And some of the storylines are real life cases, you know. But the speed at which they're able to do things in reality is not what happens. You know, if you have a very complicated case of murder investigation, that can take months, even years. But the programs are able to solve, you know, crimes very, very quickly. But it's a good, you know, it's a good advert for the police.
Of course.
And you know, it creates
glamorizes
mystery.
the profession.
Yeah, so I think, you know, glamour is good, but I think real police work is pretty tough at times. And you know, as you take murder investigations and others, it would take months and years to actually solve. So, but it's good. It's good image. It's good reputation. And it actually sometimes provides the police with more recruits as well, because people want to join. But
what was the key difference, would you say, in policing between the UK and the US?
US has, firstly, too many police forces.
Really?
They have 22,000 police forces. From 10 people police forces to New York being the biggest may have up to 30, 40,000
But
officers.
Is that because they have more crime?
No, partly because, you know, they want more checks and balances in terms of, you know, police forces. So in UK we have very few police forces. We have one, and it's a bigger area as well, but we have 43 police forces.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I think today, you know, what happens in communities often has, you know, cross-border, national, international dimensions. And I think, you know, the fewer the police forces you have, the more you're likely to be able to, you know, firstly, they're going to be cheaper to run, but also more likely you're going to be able to join information and intelligence and other things together to actually deal with the problems. The second thing, they're all armed. They're absolutely armed. They're much more into the specialized aspects, creating SWAT teams and, you know, almost a paramilitary type approach. You know, in UK we have a much more softer approach. You know, you got the Bobby on the beat who's not armed.
But which approach is more effective?
Well, I think it depends on different demographics, really, you know, and depends on what history you've come from.
But do you think you have a better grip on crime in the UK or in the US?
Well, I personally think that, you know, if you have eyes and ears in the communities, and you have people who work with the communities rather than, you know, kind of act as some sort of a stronger authority, that has a better result, because community policing is all about actually getting information from the community and actually dealing with it, and also the community supporting you in witnesses coming together, victims being much more kind of receptive and satisfied with what you do. So I think, you know, perhaps I'm biased, but I think UK has a good history of policing, which many other countries I travel around the world actually want to copy.
Now, in 1989, you were superintendent and then assistant chief constable for Lancashire. In 1999, you were deputy chief constable, then deputy assistant commissioner for the Met, and then finally assistant commissioner. What was the highlight of your career?
Well, the highlight of my career was coming to London. I'll tell you why, because I had worked in Manchester, which is a very big police force. I'd worked in Leicestershire, which was a small county force. I'd worked in Lancashire, which was a mid-sized force, so I'd had a lot of kind of county type, but to come to a major city like London, and when I came here, I became the commander in charge of Westminster.
Yes.
Now here, where all the state institutions are,
yes, of course.
it is the biggest policing area in the country. To become Deputy Assistant Commissioner in charge of policing Westminster, I thought that was kind of, you know, absolutely fantastic, really.
Now, how does a police officer learn to deal with the horrors and the abuse of what you see while you're policing?
Well, I think police officers become quite hardened in time because they see the worst things, they see the good things. And sometimes what happens is that, you know, as a kind of a way of dealing with these things, you know, humor becomes quite a good safety valve.
Because you see some pretty horrific things, don't you? Especially when it comes to child abuse or rape or murder.
Yes.
It must be difficult.
Yeah, it is difficult, but I think what happens is you depersonalize it. And you almost emotionally, you know, put a blank towards it. And your job is to get these people and these perpetrators who commit these horrific crimes to justice. So there is a mission in terms of that. And I've seen, you know, some incredible investigations where people have actually, you know, worked days, hours, months sometimes to make sure that, you know, the people who committed these horrendous crimes. But I think privately, it takes quite a toll on you.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
In the sense that, you know, you keep seeing it, and you become hardened and hardened by it. And sometimes, you know, one of the greatest fears we had as senior police officers was that, you know, this sort of constant, you know, negativity that you actually see, you know, must have quite a very strong psychological impact on people. So we have learnt in UK, you know, that officers who deal with these kind of incidents have to be critically debriefed. So we sometimes do critical incident, it's called critical incident debriefing, where we bring psychologists in and others to kind of ensure that, you know, they do not suffer from what is called post-traumatic stress.
Yes, of course.
But I'm afraid, you know, it does affect some people and never recover from it. Their family life actually suffers. They often then get into either, you know, start or into alcohol abuse, etc. Not
as a coping mechanism.
As a coping mechanism, and I think, you know, it's tough on them. But we try as leaders, good leaders, try to see if we can kind of minimize that by sometimes, you know, rotating people. Sometimes critically incident.
Did you ever get emotionally involved in a case?
Well, to be honest, I spent all my time extremely emotionally involved with communities, and if I, you know, many a times, even now, you know, see that a vulnerable person, whether it is a child or elderly person, or people or communities being taken advantage of, then I'm steadfast in terms of, you know, ensuring that, you know, we do everything possible to ensure those people who commit these crimes are brought to justice. So I used to, I would say, many cases where, frankly, yes, I was emotionally attached, but from point of view of making sure that we professionally do a job and do what we have to do, is to bring these people to justice. And sometimes, you know, the justice was not handed out to these people because they got off it with a technicality, or sometimes they're able to afford a huge amount of money to pay the lawyers. But I think, you know, of course you do. But what you can't do as a police officer is think that you're going to get into retribution and take the law into your own hand, and you know, get into what is called either noble cause corruption.
No, you can't be a Van Damme.
Planting evidence, or in fact, you know, in some countries they get into extrajudicial killings. You can't do that. You have to operate within the law. And I think that's what we did.
But the law is blind.
Sometimes it is blind, but I think, you know.
And not every time justice is met. No,
but there are checks and balances, you know, and there are many cases where it has been ultimately, to a great cost to the people, that justice has not been delivered, and miscarriage of justice cases, in this country, are taken very seriously, to be honest.
Tariq, we'll go for a short break. See you soon.
And bring us back.
We're in conversation with the very controversial Tariq Ghafur.
Once more for
We're in conversation with the very controversial Tariq Ghafur. Has policing changed over the years? Do you feel that perhaps it's become more bureaucratic and more politically correct?
Yeah, I have, some views, and perhaps it's because I'm getting older. But I always kind of, had a couple of issues about policing. One is that, safety and security in communities should be a neutral agenda. It should, everybody wants to feel safe in their homes,
Yeah.
when they travel, when they're, places in crowded places, they want to feel safe. Doesn't matter what background you are, and sometimes you're vulnerable as well. But I'm afraid, what has seemed to have happened is that the policing has become too political sometimes.
You have in the past criticized or commented on Commissioner Ian Blair that he has politicized the force by putting it into the pocket of New Labour.
Yeah, I think politically, politicizing of policing is very dangerous, because what happens is then that the political masters define what you're going to do, the consequence of which is that you ignore a whole range of other things. And I think the notion of political correctness...
So you become like a cooperation.
Well,
then.
of course you are, but that you look at the bottom line, you're going to deal with certain things. But security is not like that. Security in community is that in some communities the dangers may be different to another community, and sometimes dangers are from within. Now you have to tackle those particular dangers, and I'm afraid, just pursuing narrow targets and not looking at the understanding the complexity of what is happening. And I think some of what I've said has come home to roost, because the recent riots were never ever predicted.
Yes.
The communities were changing.
Yes.
And consequently what happened is that effectively, when it happened, you had looting with disorder, with the speed at which people were able to mobilize and commit the kind of crimes they did. Caught everybody, entirely by surprise. So yes, over-politicization of policing, I think, is dangerous. And I think, the more the neutrally agenda there is, and understanding the communities and meeting their safety needs. In terms of political correctness, I think open dialogue with communities, and I talk to different communities even now. When you talk to communities openly about what are the dangers within the communities know, they feel it, they touch it, and I think that sort of open dialogue is quite important, and then deciding what are the tools that will be used to actually protect the community, or more importantly, prevent them. Otherwise, you end up just criminalizing the communities, and you fill your jails with people who then, come out even better because they've just been to a university of crime in contaminating and understanding how to do things better. So I think prevention is better than just pursuing people and putting them in jail.
You spoke against the radicalization of Islam and encouraged communities to weed out extremism in the community. Did that make you unpopular in certain religious factions?
No, but because, on one hand, promoting an open dialogue like that with the communities does make you unpopular. There are certain people who say, well, hang on, you are wearing the institution uniform, so you are speaking on behalf of them. But equally, I was very strongly against 42 days detention.
Yes, you were. I was going to mention that.
I was extremely against it, and because I didn't see any operational reason for it. So I was quite challenging in that aspect. After 7/7, when we had the bombings in London, I think at that time there was a lot of...
That must have been a difficult time for you as a Muslim Asian police officer.
Oh, it was personally and professionally very difficult time, in the sense that on two fronts. One is that after 7/7, I was literally working 24 hours a day, and not seeing, my kids, not seeing my family. So of course that created, issues. And secondly, as a police officer from a Muslim background, you know, there was pressure. There was a pressure on me in terms of, you know, how do we make sure that, you know, there is not a backlash against our communities. And to a small time, there was a backlash, and I was open about talking about it. So I think sometimes you, as a leader, you have to be brave, you know, and one of the reasons I've been popular with the public is because I don't just make sound bites. You know, I'm able to discuss serious issues. And you speak your mind. And speak my mind. And sometimes, you know, that doesn't go down very well.
Yes.
But I'm afraid, you know, that's what you are. You're a community person who's working in an institution. But, you know, you have to act professionally, and that's what I've done. And some people like it, some not. But overall, you know, the feedback that I always got was pretty positive, to be honest, from the communities.
But how serious is the growing issue of fundamentalism and extremism in Britain today?
Well, you know, people being fundamental in their views, or even being radical, or even being strong-minded in a democracy should not be a problem. Should not be a problem. I think, you know, open speech, free speech is allowed. The problem is that when that radicalization or that extremism, then is exploited to a point where a person tips over, a tipping point, and then starts to commit the kind of atrocities that were committed here in 7/7, and the kind of atrocities people who are in jail were going to commit, which is mass murder, putting everything aside. Then I think that...
But the question is to find out when do they reach that tipping point?
Well, that's a very good question, because what happened is that, you know, nobody understands exactly what are the reasons, exact reasons. There's a lot of speculation, there's a lot of information. People think what are the reasons when people reach those particular tipping points. And I always called for judicial examination of this, in terms of a proper judicial examination in terms of why did people do what they did after, and why they came from certain communities, you know. But those examinations never took place. We had those sort of examinations in 1981 when we had the riots, but we never got that. And there was a political decision not to do that, because I suspect that one of the reasons why people felt the anger, I mean, inevitably there were certain people who had contaminated young people and were trained overseas to do that. But in other cases...
I mean, it's quite common. I know a lot of people who've been approaching universities myself.
Exactly. In other cases, you know, there was a lot of anger about, you know, foreign policy, various other aspects. Anger creates vulnerability. Vulnerability, if exploited by, you know, people with, you know, intentions to do what happened here in 7/7, then that would... But there has been no real empirical judicial examination, so I think we can only speculate. And some of the speculations and theories have actually not been borne out, you know, by subsequent incidents that have occurred in many ways. So I think, you know, it's a very difficult issue. It's, but one of the ones which I try and profess to communities is that we must take shared responsibility. The authorities can only do so much, and we have to find ways in which we actually put our young people and others on the right path.
Now, you were involved in a very public race and discrimination case against Sir Ian Blair and the Metropolitan Police Service. Tariq, is the Met Police institutionally racist?
I think at the time when Macpherson reported, the Met were found to be institutionally racist. And by that I mean that, you know, as an institution, in the way they were dealing with, like, murder investigations, and at that time, you know, I am absolutely sure that the Met were institutionally racist.
That was in 2008?
2008. But then I started to see some change. You know, there was a lot of good things brought in terms of the way we deal with crimes, the way we understand communities, the way we involve communities. And I genuinely feel, and I believe, that the Met was not institutionally racist, but there were individuals who had, you know, racist tendencies, and sometimes, you know, they effectively, you know, use those.
But if those individuals are individuals in power and in position, then they really constitute the Met.
Well, and that is a problem, in the sense that if they are in power, as you say, what then happens is that basically they get smart. at how they go about doing it. And I think, as has been proven very recently, that there are individual officers in the Met who still, display and practice and actually, deliver racism. And I think that is, there is a commitment to eradicate them, but like criminals, you have to build evidence against them. But I genuinely believe, and was party to it, seeing a lot of improvements that were done in the way we deal with families, the way we deal with murders, the way we deal with including more and more members from the ethnic minorities into the police. I think that, but progression still remains a problem. After I left, 3 or 4 of the most senior officers left as well. And now we have hardly anybody who's coming through the rank to take up the kind of position I had, and it'll be another 5 to 10 years before anybody does. And I think that is a very difficult issue which has to be addressed.
But in 2004, you produced a report for the Morris Inquiry into the treatment of minority officers in the Met. And you stated that Black and Asian officers are twice as likely to be investigated and reprimanded. So it wasn't really in 2008 that discrimination was taking place. It was there, pretty much.
Yeah, it is there. And I think this issue about disproportionality, because is an issue that is a serious problem across the public sector. If you look at discipline, at that time I was looking at discipline investigations. Since having left the police, I've been looking at discipline investigations against the doctors, I've been looking at against the lawyers, I've been looking at the accountants, and the investigations by professional bodies are disproportionate, are significantly disproportionate. If you take
why do you think that's the case?
Well, because what happens is that firstly, people who are making decisions, if it happens to one of their own, they will settle it quietly, informally. If it happens involving somebody from race, either the person to whom it is reported is frightened, or the person decides that the only systematic way of dealing with it is to formalize it. And I think that is a problem, because once you formalize it, then it takes its formal course, and then more likely that the formal proceedings are going to end up in some sort of some sort of a result.
But did your report help change attitudes of the Met Police towards minority officers?
Yeah, I think in many ways I've seen the changes over the years. I think it has, but we still have the Met has still a long way to go, because the problem it has is that in its most senior ranks, it still does not have adequate representation. The consequence of which is that the communities still feel alienated. The communities still feel there's disproportionate stop and searches. The communities still feel there's disproportionate criminalization, and I think that is a serious problem, and it's a one that, frankly, can't be eradicated overnight, but will require some radical surgery. And I think time has come, perhaps, for the Met to think about affirmative action.
Now, you were regarded as a very popular and enthusiastic leader. So, when did things start to go wrong for you?
I think as an institution, I enjoyed my 10 years in the Met. I had some very big commands, but I think when I look back, I was appointed by a different commissioner.
Yes.
And when that commissioner went, a new commissioner took over. It was at that point where I felt that unnecessary focus started to get put on me. And I think,
But do you feel you were overlooked for the role of Deputy Commissioner?
Well, I don't think it's an issue about being overlooked. The issue is about, do you have the skills? Do you have the competence? Do you have the experience to equally compete for a job of a Deputy Commissioner or a Commissioner, right? And I'm afraid, I just personally felt that I had those skills, I had those competencies, and I wanted to be given a fair chance. But in an open, in a objective selection process, there are winners and losers, and I think sometimes that aspect has been overplayed. It's for others to judge, and there are many people who judge that what I actually did in the Met was very significant in operational terms, in management, in leadership terms. So frankly, that is an issue that is kind of sometimes overplayed. The big issue here was there was no need for one individual to actually pick up a fight with me. And frankly, you know, a lot of this could have been settled.
I think there were a variety of factors. There was, of course, the 42-day detention period that you felt was not the right way to progress. And also the fact that you were appointed the head of security for the Olympics, but somehow in the key decision-making areas, you were sidelined by your superiors.
Yeah, I think, you know, sometimes what the fact is and what the reality was different to actually, you know, what was portrayed in the media.
What was
and
the
of course,
reality?
a lot of what is portrayed in the media now is being discredited because there was a very close relationship between the media and the senior echelons of the Met, which now is being portrayed in a judicial inquiry, looked at, and frankly, you know, there's nothing against me in that aspect. The reality was this: that basically, I've been a career police officer for 34 years. 7/7, when 7/7 occurred here, there was a lot of focus on our communities, and I think I did a good job in making sure that the communities are not marginalized. I did a lot of work on that aspect.
Yes.
That you know, was very tough.
Yeah.
You know, it was emotionally tough. It had a lot of impact on my own personal life, various other aspects. Then after that, you know, we started to become over political in terms of, you know, the 42 days. Then I got the Olympics. I thought, well, that is, you know, very befitting.
Yeah, of course.
And I could bring a lot to, you know, the whole thing. And I put together an Olympic plan.
Yes.
And when I put together an Olympic plan, I said that the plan is going to cost 1.2 billion pounds.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was a well-structured plan, properly put forward, and the government only had 600 million. It's very interesting. The plan at the moment has cost 1.1 billion. So that is very close to what I actually suggested.
But if you were the head of security for the Olympics, why weren't you consulted before the finances were decided?
I think that was exactly what was happening, because there was a lot of marginalization going on. There was a lot of, you know, undercutting going on. And that, with my challenge of the 42 days, you know, made me unpopular, you know, amongst, you know, one person at the end of the day. And frankly, you know, then I was taking legal advice. I was taking legal advice on my contract. My contract of employment was up for renewal.
Yes.
And then it somehow got into the public domain that I was taking legal advice. And then, you know, what happened is this person, plus his head of human resources, who's since been discredited, went publicly paraded me in front of, you know, when I arrived from Liverpool.
Yeah.
And the whole thing then just ran away. And what happens then is the media took over, the lawyers took over, you know, the whole thing ran away. And to a certain extent, the critical moment in that was that when I did my final press conference.
Yes, that's what I was actually coming to, because you filed a complaint at the Employment Tribunal.
Yes.
So why did you feel the need to go public and go to the press and inform them about it?
Because what was happening was there was a huge amount of briefings going on by the Met, and interestingly, some of those people who were being briefed are now subject of appearances before Leveson.
Yeah.
Some of them who were reporting actually have been arrested for corruption. So there was a huge amount of briefings going on against me. I never said a word. There were other people talking about me, and I felt that...
Do you feel that you were being ambushed?
Oh, absolutely. And I felt that the best way is to put the record straight, and it was the first comment I actually made, public comment, because there was nothing attributed to me before then directly. So I thought I had to put the record straight, and that is what I did. And then I left.
But do you feel that your claim damaged the reputation of the Met Police and would deter agents from now entering the police force?
Well, I think you know, the support I got from the public made me feel basically that that was the case at that time. In fact, you know, members of the public and the communities were ready to protest. And I had to say to them, look, you know, I don't want any protests. I tried to minimize the impact. I was hugely popular. I was, you know, seen as the highest ranking public servant. highest ranking police officer, not only in UK, but in the Western world from our communities. So inevitably, you know, if something like that happens, that has an impact.
Yeah.
But I think, I hope not, you know. I've always said to people since that, you know, and I speak in a lot of public forums, that we have to be part of the uniformed services of this country. We have to be, you know, we have to excel in them, we have to progress in them, and we have to make sure that we are representative. So I'm pleased to continue to see more and more people joining, but I still have issues around progression, and I think we need people at the highest levels of our public services from our communities.
Now, after you made your race claim, you received a lot of death threats. You had to hire bodyguards to protect yourself and your family. Did you report these threats to the police?
The police, of course, were not best of friends with me. What was ironic, I was head of serious organised crime investigations in the Met for nearly 4 years, and dealing with some of the most complex crimes. I never got any sort of threats from anybody whilst I was doing that. But I think most of the threats came because of, you know, the negative reporting that was being put into the media. And of course what happens is that gave a charter to the racist and people with very right-wing views to actually throw, you know, abuse at me. But what I was very encouraged by, you know, there is in adversity there's always there's something positive, you know, is that the 27,000 officers I commanded during my time in the Met, not one of them went to the media and complained against me and my leadership. The 2.8 million community members I face-to-face dealt with, not one of them came back and said to the media, because the media were hunting me down, lot of it briefed by certain people at Scotland Yard, came and spoke up against me, and that gave me a lot of encouragement, and then thereafter Bollywood even made a film on me, you know, which without my knowledge, you know, they built made a film called Shoot on Sight, which they had Nazruddin Shah and all the top actors. So frankly, I actually, in many ways, this adversity strengthens the hero status in the communities.
Now, you made an out-of-court settlement in November 2008. Why didn't you go to court and fight your case?
I think two reasons. One is the person who started all this was actually sacked by the mayor.
Yes, he left.
Okay, and secondly, for me to go through this after that would have meant a lot of sacrifice. I have seen people who have gone through proceedings, legal dramas, have been badly emotionally damaged, and luckily I didn't get damaged through this. And thirdly, I think it would have hugely undermined what I would have disclosed, would have hugely undermined the confidence of our communities in policing, and I was really not prepared to do that. I think I believe, and I believe to date, that, you know, we have to be part of the solution in terms of dealing with the issues. So I think it was a judgment I make, and frankly,
some of your critics say that it was because your lawyer had a questionable past. And that's the reason that you dropped your case. No,
I think the lawyer, you know, was not chosen by me. It was chosen by somebody else, and the circumstances underpinning that lawyer were unfortunate. You know, in hindsight, you know, things could have been different, but it was nothing to do with that. It was the fact that, you know, one person who had started, I had nothing against the whole institution, I've been part of it, had left. Secondly, I really felt that, you know, given, you know, the profile I had with the communities and everything, it would be a huge dent. And thirdly, you know, I think it was a personal decision to just draw a line. But what I can say is that the kind of figures that were put out, that was again propaganda.
It was like up to £1 million.
That was you know, another propaganda by the Met, and all that is now coming out in the relationship between the Met, the politicians, and the media.
But was this also a propaganda that some of your critics said that perhaps you used the race card to your advantage, and that you were promoted in quick succession as the Met Police wanted to look politically correct and have a high-ranking senior Asian officer?
Well, it's easy to say that, but let's look at the fact. 34 years in policing, 4 different police forces. So I, in experiential terms, worked in every different policing environment. Graduate level, in terms of, I got my Queen's Police Medal for an operational aspect in relation to policing Westminster. Overseas experience, double graduate of the FBI Academy, you know, commended many times, you know, huge amount of awards, three doctorates, etc. You know, people don't give this just for, you know, out of nothing, because you have to prove and give facts. So I think this was a convenient label for people to add, really, that, you know, I was promoted beyond you know, what I could have achieved, and people, you know, who work with me and others could have achieved a lot more. So I think it's totally unfair in terms of doing that. But of course, that was part of the hysteria and briefings that were being given to the media.
But Tariq, you weren't the first officer to sue the Met Police. You helped ease the return of Sergeant Verdi, who successfully sued the Met Police for unfair dismissal. In fact, he kind of sued them repeatedly quite a few times, and he was successful in his legal action. Does the Met Police not learn?
Well, I think, you know, learning takes place, but it's not sustained. You know, over a short term we learn and then we move on, because that's the way the policing operates. And then we make mistakes, we move on. What needs to happen is that, you know, the corporate memory of all these cases needs to be digested by leaders, and to make sure that...
But I'm just surprised that he'd already sued and won.
Yes.
So why was he again victimized? Did they not anticipate he might sue again? Or if you sue, you consider damaged goods by the Met Police?
Well, I think it is difficult. Once you take on any organization and you take on any establishment, then of course you are damaged goods. And I think sometimes, you know, I used to find and see that people are trying to bring you back into the organization, and in just over trying, they're making more mistakes. So consequently, the other person, you know, is damaged, and then repeatedly, this kind of notion of repeated civil litigation. Mine was very one-off, you know. It was unnecessary. It was orchestrated by one person, surrounded by a team that, you know, now has been found to be completely dysfunctional. And I think it was a shame, because I could have retired, you know. But having said that, you know, that experience itself has made me more resolute to ensure that people who are coming through the ranks are given the support, are given the mentoring, and I would appeal to everybody that, you know, we got to be part of the institutions of this country at the highest level, and we should really celebrate that sort of success.
How do you de-stress? Do you still play squash? Because you were quite a champion and used to represent the police at a national level.
Yes, well, as I've gone older, my knees and my hips are... so I'm actually, you know, engaging in lighter...
Golf?
You know, I don't play golf, I don't have time for that.
Yes.
But I go to the gym, you know, I go to the gym and I engage in some gym exercises.
But were you a Jahangir Khan or a Janshir Khan fan?
No, nowhere near. I played them once.
Really?
And, you know, got a couple of points off them. But I played for the police at a national level, and it was great, you know, because we used to play different services. And I think de-stressing, largely, mine is through sport. Mine is either through sport or fitness.
But if any time you needed de-stressing, I think it was 2008. Because not only were you in litigation against your employer, but you had a setback in your personal life also. Your marriage was on rocky grounds. How did you cope with all this turmoil happening in just a span of 1 year? Yeah,
it was very difficult, because, you know, it was the pressures of working all those hours, etc., caused the kind of separation and breakdown in my marriage. But I think, you know, I always, you know, I deal with crises.
With a smile on my face.
And what you have to do is, you have to slow down.
Yes.
You have to raise the game, look at the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And what you have to do is then take a milestone approach, that you deal with things one at a time. But all that aspect, you know, thankfully, you know, yes, obviously, I think it'd be wrong to say that it didn't have an impact on me. It had an impact on me. But, you know, where things happen, there's always good. You know, I remain very close with my children. They were doing very well, you know. I have a wife, and you know.
But you were married. You were married before also.
Yes, yes.
Your first marriage.
Yes.
Did you marry for love the first time?
No. I think it was, you know, what many families faced at that time. You know, mine was a pure arranged marriage.
Is it true that you were already in a relationship with a colleague of yours when you married your first wife?
No, that was again, you know, because I was in the public, you know, and was utilized by the other party. But that relationship had finished. It was.
Why didn't you marry her? She was a white girl, wasn't she?
No, but I think that relationship had finished, you know, and at the time the marriage took place, you know, it was done with a honest intention. A lot of pressure from your dad, huh? Honest intentions, but I think in hindsight, you know, perhaps there was pressure. But frankly, I think, you know, one of the things that has happens is that particularly in policing, you know, when you are, or in public services where you get emotionally attached to your job and, you know, you consider that you're doing common good, then, you know, your domestic life suffers. And sadly, in the police, when you look at, you know, overall rates of divorces, etc., in the police, it's very significant. But, you know,
but do you
of course,
feel
those
that
were sad period.
Do you feel that when you're in a position of power and you have a uniform that, you know, the ladies are attracted? No,
my strength has always been that, you know, I've never used, you know, my power of rank or my power of position for any advantage. You know, I've been totally committed, and it's actually been the other way because there was a year when I was an inspector, I never took a single day's leave. You know, I was allowed 30 days. So I think if I was married, I was over-married to my job.
So it's not, I mean, some say you have a reputation of being a ladies' man.
No,
not true?
I think that is, you know, again, perception rather than reality, to be honest.
Are women complicated?
I don't understand them.
You don't?
I don't understand. But having said that, you know, I think I've run diverse teams. Yeah. I was the first one to appoint a woman in charge of the flying squad in the 100-odd years of history, in charge of the diplomatic mission. And what I've realized is that they think holistically. Yes. You know, we are much more kind of, you know, they want to go shopping, we want to buy. Yes. You know, so when I come home after work, you know, I want to watch the television and read the paper. I want to tell you everything that has happened, you know. And,
that's not going to change, by the way.
I know. And
that's how they're made. Yeah. I hope you know that.
Yeah, of course. This is what I mean, holistic thinkers, you know. And but I tell you an interesting story in terms of, you know, as we were talking about this. Yeah. I was an inspector in Longside in Manchester, and there's about 5 Pakistani families living together in one street, and something happened. There was a fight on the street, so the men were fighting on one side, the women were fighting on the other side. All my officers who came there were white officers, and of course they separated the men, and the women continued to fight. And I arrived on the scene, and they didn't want to do anything. They didn't want to touch the women. So I said to the van driver, just get the van, open the doors, and I shouted at these women in Punjabi. You know,
what did you say?
Well, I said, 2 minutes hai, je apne car de vich na gaye na, to main van de vich sit dena. Right. And suddenly, they all looked at me, wow, they disappeared. Right. And so these officers said to me, what the hell did you do? I said, well, I said to them, that's the reason I'm an inspector and you are constables. The moral was that, you know, I don't understand. But I think there has been difficult periods. I have to acknowledge that. But I think some of the perceptions are wildly off the mark.
Now, your second marriage of 20 years failed. Did you fall out of love?
I think I came to London and, as I said, you know, 7/7 took its toll because 24 hours I was working. And,
you just drifted apart?
And just drifted apart, yes.
Is it because you fell in love with someone else?
No, that was after the marriage finished.
So your relationship with Rubina Haider did not end your marriage?
No, we're married. We're you know, a couple together.
Are you married?
Yes.
Oh, when did you guys get married?
Yeah, about 2 years ago.
Oh, okay. But it wasn't your relationship with Rubina that ended.
No, I think we drifted apart. To be honest, and I think partly because I was living in London, and after 7/7, huge amount of time here.
So you did fall in love again, though?
Yes.
Is monogamy natural?
No, it's emotional.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I think, any relationship is about emotions.
Would you call yourself a very emotional man?
I am emotional in some aspects, but of course,
When it comes to matter of the heart, are you an emotional man?
Well, I think so. Yeah, I think I'm a deeply emotional man in that aspect. But when I see, bad things, because the type of profession I've been part of, in some places I can be unemotional. But I think where feelings are involved, I'm very emotional.
So when you're in love, you fall hard?
Well, I think, that's for others to judge, not me.
So what does the future hold for Tariq Ghafur?
To be honest, I've realized that I've got a huge amount of knowledge. I have continued to work deep into the communities. I'm doing a lot of work in developing countries, passing my knowledge over. And, as long as I can live a happy, contented, healthy life, that's good enough for me. But it is good for knowledge to be passed on to others, and I hope that many, many others perspire to what I did.
I think the one question a lot of people would like to know is, in your opinion, what's the biggest security threat to Britain today?
I think the biggest threat to UK still remains a threat from within.
Really? Any regrets, Tariq?
There are many, many things, of course, in hindsight, and it's a perfect science, you could have done things differently. My only kind of regret is that, I wish I had a more work-life balance in terms of what I did, but I think apart from that, none whatsoever, because the police service gave me a lot. I know a lot about communities, I saw a lot, I met some fantastic people, I've seen some great, great role models that have developed. So I've visited many countries, so I think in many ways no regrets at all.
Tariq, it's been such a pleasure, and I must say a special thank you to you, because you've been so candid and so honest. And, it's actually been just a joy, and thank you for your honesty. I really appreciate it. I know that some of the questions were a bit tricky, but you didn't shy away.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
And before we go, I have a very quick question round. Nothing difficult, very jovial, and you have to give me one choice. Pathani or Punjabi?
Punjabi.
Dominatrix or French maid?
By nature, if you wear a uniform, dominatrix.
And they don't carry guns, they carry whips. Margaret Thatcher or Benazir Bhutto?
Margaret Thatcher, definitely.
Arsenal or Tottenham?
Manchester City.
Dal chawal or bhindi?
Dal chawal.
Priests or pimps?
Good God, I've seen the best and worst, both of them.
So you have
None
to
of
choose.
them.
No, but you have to choose one.
None of them.
It has to be a choice.
Yeah.
It has to be least favorite choice.
Well, more towards religion than priests.
Communist or fascist?
Definitely communist, not fascist. I hate fascists.
Madonna or Kylie?
The more energetic one, Madonna.
Imran Khan or President Musharraf?
I can't. I won't choose either, because honestly...
Seriously, come on. Imran Khan or Pervez Musharraf?
No, I won't choose any of them, because I like both of them.
But you just have to say one name.
No, because
even Pervez Musharraf had to do this.
Yeah.
And he had to pick one.
Yeah.
And it was with Imran Khan and someone else. So
Yeah. But because I said I'm completely non-political,
So who do you like in Itzi with Sitini Mini bit more?
Yeah. Where? Who? Me?
Imran Khan or Pervez Musharraf?
No, Obama.
It has to be one of the two. You've been so good with answering all these tough questions, and you're giving me a little hiccup here. Imran, great. Zinat Aman or Parveen Bobby?
Zinat Aman.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Pleasure's
Thanks
all
very
mine.
much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks.